Hi everyone and welcome to Pracey's Research Snapshots. My name is Charmaine Burney and it's a pleasure to present snapshot number 26, a scoping review completed by Salminen and colleagues focusing on professional collaboration for children and adolescents with neurodevelopmental disorders. Pracey would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of all the countries throughout Australia. We acknowledge their connections to land, sea and community and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. We extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples tuning in to this presentation. This was recorded on beautiful Bundjalung country on the east coast of Australia, where New South Wales meets Queensland. Before we get into the details of the review, it's important to establish a few background pieces of information and underlying concepts that provide a rationale for including such a review in Pracey's snapshots, but also to understand what we already know from the literature before exploring this particular study. Many of you would already be aware that multiple different professional groups and educators, as well as other community service providers, support children with developmental differences, delays or disorders. This might include children with autism spectrum disorder, global developmental delay, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, speech and language difficulties or learning disorders, but might include other types of neurodevelopmental difficulties as well. Seemingly in almost all countries, children and families are required to navigate complex systems that include education service provisions, health and social services, and other types of supports. While systems are unique in each country, the complexity of service navigation seems widespread. We know that fragmented services can reduce the effectiveness of interventions and the impact of supports. Conversely, we know already from the literature that collaboration can improve a number of different child, family and educational outcomes in the short and long term. So with that background in mind, this review sought to explore what is known about professional collaboration and its impacts on children and adolescents with neurodevelopmental disorders. It discusses enablers and barriers to collaboration across services, including health and social services, education services and schools, and their interactions with families. It also explored outcomes and their relationship with different collaborative processes. So what did the research group do? They used scoping review methodology and were guided by PRISMA reporting guidelines. The search period for studies to be included in the review was between the years 2000 and 2022. 7 databases were adopted across education, health and social services literature, including ERIC, Medline, SANAL and PsycInfo. Included studies had to meet specific criteria that were focused on cross-sectoral and cross-service collaboration. Reference lists were explored to ensure all relevant included papers were considered for the study, and the qualitative focus of the study was described. 317 studies were originally identified and 58 full-text reviews occurred. This resulted in a final number of 29 studies that were included. So what did the researchers find? They found that collaboration occurred through many phases of involvement between children with neurodevelopmental challenges and service providers. Those phases included the assessment phase, intervention planning, and when coordinating transitions. They found that success depended on a number of different factors, including a shared understanding of goals, supports to be put in place, and the roles of each service. Success also depended on communication strategies that were well adopted by all those collaborating around the child or adolescent, and mutual respect between those providing services, families, children, and education providers. Professional learning was an important part of collaboration, as was family involvement, which was seen to be central to all collaborative processes. They also found that collaboration was limited by a number of factors. This includes working in professional silos, time constraints, resource limitations that meant collaboration was a lower priority than providing the support itself, legal restrictions that prevented the sharing of information or the on-site visits that may have needed to occur, and general information sharing challenges. So you might be watching or listening to this presentation, wondering how this information might support you in your work, in your support of families, or with the support you might be providing to one of your children directly. So there are a few takeaways from what was found in this scoping review. First of all, that strengthening partnerships and teams actually matters. It has an impact on outcomes. We should be thinking about how we centre families in all decision making, not just key points in decision making pathways, but in all decisions that might impact on children and families. Collaborative professional learning was identified as a key action that could enhance collaboration and outcomes for children, families and service providers. Better information sharing and breaking down the barriers that limit such sharing of information is key to successful collaboration. Thought can be given to reducing the duplication of services and the specific coordination tools and mechanisms that support communication and collaboration to occur across all parties that might be involved with a child or adolescent with neurodevelopmental support needs. By doing these things, we can actually contribute to better outcomes for children and families. So how do these research findings align with the best practice framework that I'm sure you've all seen now since its publication last year? We can see that the child and family centred principle is really reflected in this study. There's been an emphasis across studies on strong partnerships with families in planning, assessment and the provision of information. And the findings of this review support a relationship between that partnership and outcomes. We see that these studies that have been included in this review directly align with connection and collaboration principles. We see that teamwork can support assessment, intervention planning and service coordination from the studies included in this review. This review focuses on outcomes and evidence. A scoping review by nature tries to pull together the existing evidence around a particular topic. Here, the focus was on collaboration between service providers, educators and families. And we can see an impact on outcomes relating to assessment and support delivery, but also on family wellbeing, satisfaction and quality of life. We also see a focus here on participation and everyday settings. A key principle to the framework, it's also something that's been strongly considered in this review. We can see the authors discussing how collaborative approaches improve participation in education settings in particular and also have an influence on inclusion. Finally, this study also explored a number of different factors and ideas around relationship-based supports, ecologically based supports, and focusing on strengths. The researchers were based primarily in the University of Turku and the University of Eastern Finland. The researchers specialised in education, special education, psychiatry, social sciences and child wellbeing. So you can see a broad group of perspectives have come together in this review, truly reflecting collaboration. This review had a number of strengths, including its comprehensive coverage of the literature where collaboration had occurred between services, education providers and families for children with neurodevelopmental disorders as well as adolescents. There were a number of limitations, however. A high number of studies were focused on children with autism, and the studies included did not cover the full breadth of neurodevelopmental difficulties or disorders we see around the world today. A full range of papers were included, including those with variable methodologies. Even papers that were discussion papers were included, and there was a paucity of empirical studies, including randomised controlled trials. Future directions, therefore, would be to incorporate higher-level methodologies in studies exploring collaboration, and to focus specifically on collaboration principles, mechanisms and structures to determine which of these might have the greatest impact on outcomes for children, families and communities. Most studies were from overseas, so we do need to consider the Australian context when interpreting these findings, and we need to consider how we can encourage and implement more Australian studies in this area. Collaboration between service providers, education, families and children has arguably never been more important than it is today. So for me, the key takeaway from this paper is that collaboration between education, healthcare and social care professionals really can improve well-being, inclusion and other outcomes for children with neurodevelopmental disorders and their families. This is something we have to hold true and prioritise, as we sometimes can get swept up in the other priorities we might have as service providers or families or education providers. But we must come back to emphasising collaboration in all the actions that we take. So here is the full reference for those of you that might like to take this away, share it with others and read it in more detail. Thank you so much for tuning into this presentation. I hope we get to chat further about collaboration in the future. Thank you.